Some time later, Jesus and his disciples crossed to the far shore of the Sea of Galilee by boat. A great crowd of people followed him because they saw the signs he had performed by healing those who were ill. Then Jesus went up on a mountainside and sat down with his disciples. The Jewish Passover festival was near. And when Jesus looked up and saw a great crowd coming towards him, he said to Philip, "Where shall we buy bread for these people to eat?" He asked this only to test him, for he already had in mind what he was going to do. Philip answered him, "It would take more than half a year's wages to buy enough bread for each one to have a bite." Another of his disciples, Andrew, Simon Peter's brother, spoke up, "Here is a boy with 5 small barley loaves and 2 small fish. But how far will they go among so many?" Jesus said, "Make the people sit down." There was plenty of grass. There were about 5,000. Jesus then took the loaves, gave thanks, and distributed to those who were seated as much as they wanted. He did the same with the fish. When they had all had enough, he said to his disciples, "Gather the pieces that are left over. Let nothing be wasted." So they gathered them and filled 12 baskets with the pieces of the 5 barley loaves left over. After the people saw the sign Jesus performed, they began to say, "Surely this is the prophet who is come to the world."
Hello, it's Sunday the 2nd of August. It's August, March, April, May, June, July. August. We are in our 6th calendar month of experiencing lockdown. And I can only just say again that I hope this has been bearable at worst, and maybe a very creative and time full of learning and exploring and discovering of the things that are most important to you and the things that you want to shape your life around, the things that you are already that you might not have known because in the hustle and bustle of your life before, or whatever form it took, those things weren't coming to the surface. So as I usually do on a Sunday, I'm sharing some thoughts about the gospel reading for today. Sometimes I do one of the other readings, but today I want to focus on the gospel. And I can't vouch for the historical accuracy of the version of the feeding of the 5,000 that you've just seen. We do not know whether in amongst the disciples that Jesus had there was a Wookiee, a Mandalorian, a wizard, and a Yeti. But I will say that I think God is wonderfully inclusive, and so why not? But that's the story for today, the story of the feeding of the 5,000. It's in a number of the Gospels, and it takes slightly different forms, but the story is there as it is. A large crowd follows Jesus out into the countryside. Dinner time comes, or supper time, or tea time, depending on what part of the world you're in, and what you call your evening meal. And some Gospels say Jesus, to test the disciples, said, "What are we going to do? Go and feed all these people." And in other versions, he just says to them, "Here's the challenge. Feed these people." There's a little boy who has in his lunchbox or his dinner box, don't know what he's doing out so late on his own, but anyway, he has 5 loaves of bread and 2 fish. Sounds like quite a lot for a lunch, but I have a teenage son. Maybe he was about that age. 5 loaves of bread and 2 fish would be an afternoon snack. And he gives those, and they use it, and they break it, and they share it, and the story's there as you experience it. Usually, when we tell the story, we tell it from 2 directions. We talk about the miracle, and we talk about Jesus and the way that he shows compassion and uses his divinity, I suppose, his godliness to his godness, not just his godliness, to somehow magically multiply, miraculously multiply, so that everyone is fed. Or we talk about the little boy, or the teenage boy, whoever he is, and we talk about generosity, and we talk about sharing, and we talk about giving what we have for the good of all. And those are both important themes, and they're both there. But today I want to talk just for a little while about the crowd. The crowd who are willing to receive little bits of bread and fish that have come from who knows where, and they are willing to sit down and eat these things together. There is a willingness in the crowd to take what they're given. I once heard someone joke wryly about this passage and say it's a wonderful story unless you're a vegetarian who's allergic to gluten, in which case the fish and the bread are not going to help you at all. But of course, who are these people? We don't know. But they're willing to stay for a start. They've come without food, and they think it's important enough for them to be there together to explore what Jesus is teaching and what he's doing and what that might mean for their lives. And then when the food comes around, they're willing to share it in such a way that there is enough. And we can't just simply say, well, of course Jesus would have made enough, so if someone in a corner took a whole fish and 3 loaves, the rest would have just made do with what Jesus could magically multiply. That there was an endless supply. We have to also consider each person taking their fair share as part of this miracle working, as part of everyone feeling satisfied. And yes, there were leftovers, but the point still stands. I want to talk just this morning for a minute about expectations. On my local community's sort of community Facebook page, quite regularly over the course of lockdown, there have been screeds of conversation, messaging and argument about things like why the bins haven't been collected. Either the black bins, our rubbish, or the green bins when they started to be collected. Wasn't it outrageous that they weren't collected sooner? That they only started collecting them whenever they did, the end of March or April or May, I can't remember when. It's outrageous. The bins are still at the end of my drive at the end of the day when they were split. The next day the bins are still at the end of my drive. People using words like utterly shameful and ridiculous and taking broad swipes at the city council and those who work the bin lorries in the bit of York that I live in, because their bin wasn't collected promptly as they'd expected it to be. Of course, just as many, probably more people, saying, give the bin men a break, give the city council a break. They're doing the best they can with limited resources, trying to socially distance, less trucks, less people, more bins, more rubbish because everyone's at home. When your bin gets collected, your bin gets collected. But some of the language about the strong emotion people feel when their bin hasn't been fetched, it's quite telling. I've been cycling quite a lot during lockdown, and I hope to continue that. And a number of the routes that I do are beautiful. I mean, they're all beautiful. They all contain a mixture of countryside and busy roads. And I went out on Friday. Went out on Friday. Did one of my routes, which is just over 50 kilometers. It's not very hilly. It's through flat countryside, but it's beautiful. There's a little bit of busy road, but some of it is through the most phenomenal woods, just trees arching over the road from both sides. Some of it is through open fields and countryside, which is lovely when the wind isn't blowing. But at this time of year, with the fields either about to be harvested or newly harvested, it's a lovely, lovely, never boring visual experience. And I'm grateful for that. But every route that I do, every route I have, unavoidably at some point, travels across a section of road that's just rubbish. On a bicycle, incredibly bumpy, incredibly tiring, saps my speed, saps my energy, and for however many kilometers it lasts or miles, there are just sections of road that are in a very poor state. And the same people probably who moan about their bins are some of those who will say it's outrageous that there are I don't know however many million potholes. I think it's 2 potholes for every person in the UK. I don't know which ones I want, but and it's outrageous that the council should do something about it. It's shameful, wasting our money. All this language that is so quick to judge the fact that your journey on your car or your leisure on your bicycle is a little bit bumpy. And yes, occasionally cars get damaged, bicycles get damaged. Occasionally things happen because the roads here and there are in poor condition. But the fact remains that our local councils, our civic authorities have much less money than they've ever had in real terms. And they're doing the best they can with their human failings, like the rest of us. Here's a crowd of people who follow Jesus out into the countryside and who don't take dinner and maybe don't expect anything to happen. Happy to be hungry, maybe. So, of course, they're different from us because we pay our taxes. We pay our council tax. We pay for the bins and the potholes to get sorted, don't we? We pay for that. So it should just happen the way we expect it to happen. These people didn't expect anything. They weren't owed anything. They hadn't bought into anything. So everything they get was a bonus. But still, there's a choice to make. And still, this crowd of people are willing to sit down together as strangers or friends, old or new, and they are willing to pass the plates around and take what they're given, receive it, share it, appreciate it, feast on it, experience it. John Wesley, who was the founder of the Methodist movement in the Church of England, which became the Methodist Church, I understand that. I mean, he was a vegetarian, and I understand that when he started local preaching and sending out local preachers in his travelling, and he travelled literally tens of thousands of miles in the course of his lifetime on horseback. When he sent the local preachers out, when he started a pattern of sort of sending itinerant preachers to go and lead Sunday gatherings or household gatherings in places where the Methodist movement had taken hold, he would instruct them to eat whatever was put in front of them. If there was hospitality, you just receive it. Now, I've been at the sharp end of that a bit myself. I grew up and trained in South Africa, and I spent the 1996. The first year of my training towards ordination, I spent that living in a township, the only white face in a sea of 15,000 black faces, who were confused about why I was there and a little suspicious. And I think I've said in other recordings elsewhere, I had quite regular visits from the police and others who came to just try and work out who I was and why I was there. And of course, I lived in those communities' lives, and I experienced their life as my own. And in the course of being in people's homes, in the course of the food that comes onto a plate after a funeral, in all kinds of settings, I looked down at a plate of food and thought, I have no idea what some of this is. I know that some of it came from an animal. I don't know what animal or what part of the animal this is, but I need to eat it. I need to eat it. The only thing I could never eat was anything that included sour milk, which in some black African cultures is just a staple. It's just a part of your daily life. Part of your life is to drink or eat sour milk that's gone off. Nothing would make me retch faster than that, and so I would just graciously decline and say that would happen. But I remember at college when we would get our bowls of porridge, my white colleagues and I, we would put butter and syrup and sugar and those things, and my black colleagues would put vinegar into their porridge because they were used to eating sour porridge. But I ate what was there, and I think that as a principle within John Wesley's life and those whom he sent out, it's a good thing to do. I find it really sad. Rebecca and I have been to Greece, we've been to Portugal twice on holiday, been to Croatia, and been to a few places, been really privileged to do that. But especially in Greece, the sadness of walking along the beachfront in a fairly remote corner of a Greek island and seeing just row upon row of tavernas, with a traditional Greek menu, which was just extraordinary, unless you're a vegetarian. Again, Rebecca struggled a bit. And then alongside it, an English menu with fish and chips and a Sunday roast and a great big banner advert saying that the Sky Sports football coverage would have an English commentary and English beer, and you just think, well, okay, isn't it good to go somewhere and live people's lives for a bit, eat what they eat, see what they see, do what they do, look around you, take part, rather than, in some cases, as we see happening, demanding that some Greek beachfront taverna halfway across Europe it serves what we want to eat. And I remember being in one of those and listening to someone who came in be almost contemptuous of the fact that this place wasn't going to serve a Sunday roast, or they didn't show the football with the English commentary, or they didn't have a full English breakfast. I can't remember which it was, but they were almost affronted by the fact that what they wanted wasn't going to be there. One of the great lessons that traces a thread through all of this time in which we will wrestle with coronavirus in earnest, and then in our vigilance beyond it, because it is going to be with us, some say forever, in some form. There is for all of us, I think, a rich vein of thinking and reflecting to do that is about expectation. That is about what we think the world should be like. And maybe a little bit for all of us, or a lot, what we think the world owes us. Because we do pay our taxes, because we do pay our council tax, because we do put our bin out promptly on a Friday morning and whenever it is, and we don't like it still to be there on a Friday evening when we come back, thank you very much. And 100 other things that are our demands, that the world turns in the way that we want it to, or that the world turns in the way that it has said it will turn, and even though circumstances have changed, it should still turn that way. This is a story about a miracle. It is about 5,000 people receiving, or 5,000 men, because those are the only ones who were counted, it would seem. 5,000 men in the original story sitting down and having food, but there were women and children there too, we know, so it's far more. It's a story about a miracle, about Jesus somehow demonstrating God's compassion, God's grace, God's the centrality of eating together as part of discovering God's kingdom and the gift of shared lives. It's a story about a little boy who has 5 loaves of bread and 2 fish. Still sounds like a lot. Who somehow is willing to give those up, and his generosity is an example to us of how to be benevolently generous and kind and give away what we have. And a really important lesson, again, especially in a time like this. But today I want to just remind myself, that I'm somewhere in the crowd with whatever expectations I have. And whoever it is that holds the loaves and the fishes, or whatever it is that I think they owe me or owe us, whatever I believe should be on the table, however I think I should be served, however I deal with the plate when it comes past me and try to take a reasonable portion without thinking that I might need a bit more than that just to be safe. That all of those questions are there for me. They're for you. They're for us. We are good at complaining. We are quite good, it would seem, at taking to Facebook pages and telling the world how it should be on our terms and why, and who's right and who's wrong, and who's lazy and who isn't, and who's responsible for the fact that there are potholes in the road and long waiting lists and for medical procedures, or for counselling appointments, or for all the other things that are an outrage and a shame, and some of them are. It is never going to be a good thing that people have to wait as long as they do for talking therapies rather than the prescription of an antidepressant. or alongside the prescription of an antidepressant. But I just wonder whether there is something in this for you and I that is about being in the crowd and receiving what we receive. Now, I'm not for a moment, and I want to end by saying this, not for a moment saying just resign yourself to whatever ends up on your lap. Yeah, this is not about just putting down the tools that are important in society, where each of us takes part in shaping what the world is like. This is not about blind acceptance of someone's political policy or someone's budgeting decision, or it's not about that. It's about not feeling that we are owed something that we perhaps aren't. It is about what is enough in the messiness of all of life and all of this coronavirus season. What is enough? For that crowd, there was enough. There was enough, and some left over. So what's enough for you and I? What do you think the world owes you? What are you willing to simply receive and be grateful for? I wonder how much emotional and even physical energy we waste, we give away. How much of our creativity we lose because we get ourselves wound up about things that aren't just the way we would like them to be. I, in writing a little piece for our parish sort of newsletter a couple of months ago, put a Gary Larson cartoon on there on the far side. 4 little pictures, 4 people with half a glass of water in front of them. First one, the glass is half full. Second one, the glass is half empty. Third one, half full, no, half empty. What was the question? And the fourth person just stands there with their hands on their hips saying, hey, I ordered a cheeseburger. How are you feeling about the way the world is turning and the way you think it should be turning? Who owes you, and who owes you what? What do you think you've paid for that you haven't received yet, that you worked hard to earn? This story is about a crowd who are fed because somehow together they're willing to pass around and accept and share what they have, what is there, and for all of them to rejoice in that, I'm sure, and be grateful that even if their stomachs may not have been completely filled, because we don't know, but at least they got something. The parable of the feeding of the 5,000. The story of the feeding of the 5,000. It's not a parable. I wonder what it says to you and to me today. And I'll leave you with those thoughts. Of course, you're welcome to come back at me and say, what a load of nonsense, Rory. Of course, the government and others have failed us, and they owe us explanations, never mind changes of policy or program. And yes, you may be absolutely right. But somehow, alongside that, in spite of that, whatever those strong feelings may be for many of us, there is still a question of our sense of entitlement and our willingness to receive what the world is putting on our plate right now, and to make the best of it and to share it around. So bless you, whatever today is going to be, whatever the week ahead is going to be. And again, thanks for taking part by listening and listening to the end. Cheers.